Joining us now from West Palm Beach, President Trump's Deputy National Security Advisor and a familiar figure to Fox viewers, Katie McFarland. Katie, welcome back to Fox News Sunday.
It's great to be back on Fox News, Chris. Thank you.
What is the president's reaction to the missile launch? Failed, yes, but still the willingness of North Korea to launch that missile in open defiance of President Trump's warnings.
Well, look, it's not a surprise. Even in the last year, President Kim of North Korea has launched over 30 missiles. Most of them have failed. So it couldn't come as a surprise to us. We were expecting something, particularly surrounding the birthday of his grandfather. So it wasn't a surprise. I briefed President Trump on it last night. We saw it for what it was. Secretary Mattis issued the statement. The president doesn't have any further comment on this particular launch attempt.
Is he distressed or upset that they've ignored his warnings?
No, and let me sort of preface this by saying, at the beginning of the administration in January, President Trump asked the National Security Council, asked me to chair a series of interagency meetings, and that's my job as the number 2 on the National Security Council. I go to all the agencies and departments, the intelligence community, Defense Department, State Department, the military, and say, what are the options here? And that's what we did with North Korea. We did a big, wide study, and we directed the intelligence community and others, come up with things that you haven't thought of before. Think outside the box. And they came back with some really interesting suggestions, sanctions, diplomatic things we could do, secondary sanctions we could do, and obviously military options. And we presented them to the president. He was very pleased with it. And that allowed him, when he went to Mar-a-Lago for the summit with the Chinese president, to talk in earnest about North Korea. And they spent a lot of time talking about North Korea. The Chinese president has a lot of influence over North Korea. China provides some 85% of their food, their transportation fuel, their cooking fuel. So they have a lot of economic influence as well as other influence over North Korea. And the two presidents talked about how China might help, along with the other efforts America's taking with our allies.
There's a lot there, and I want to unpack it, but I have to ask you another question first. Okay. Did the U.S. sabotage this missile?
Now, Chris, you know we can't talk about secret intelligence and things that might have been done, covert operations that might have happened, so I really have no comment on that, and nor should I.
But as Greg Palcott pointed out, there have been cyber attacks in the past. Should the Kim regime consider that a possibility?
Well, the cyber attacks that have occurred in the past are on the part of the Kim regime when they hacked Sony Pictures. So, you know, I do think we're entering a whole new era, not just with North Korea, but with everybody, with any country, major country. We are entering a cyber platform, a cyber battlefield. That is where a lot of the wars of the future are going to be fought. But I don't have any particular comment on what happened with the North Korean missile. But it was a fizzle.
President Trump ratcheted up pressure on North Korea and the Kim regime this week. This was one of his tweets. North Korea is looking for trouble. If China decides to help, that would be great. If not, we will solve the problem without them, USA. And he said this.
I don't know if this sends a message. It doesn't make any difference if it does or not. North Korea is a problem. The problem will be taken care of.
Despite the tough talk and sending a carrier strike force to the area, as we're showing pictures right now, Katie, North Korea showed off new long-range and submarine-launched missiles and conducted a test launch. You talked about this long discussion of options.
Yeah.
What does the president do now?
Well, I think in that parade, there were a whole number of new missiles that were shown, and there were some canisters, which may or may not have held missiles, but they were canisters that could have held intercontinental ballistic missiles. In other words, missiles that could go from North Korea and potentially reach the United States. So the threat is upon us. This is something President Trump is going to deal with in the first year. But I would also say that as a result of the Mar-a-Lago summit, the two presidents were meant to have, you know, short conversations, short one-on-one conversations. What they ended up having were several hours of conversations.
Well, let me talk to you about China, because the president has indicated after that he formed a good relationship with President Xi and that he's hoping President Xi will help with North Korea. There was talk this week about the fact that China is turning back coal shipments from North Korea and threatening to cut off its oil supplies. North Korea depends, 90% of its oil comes from China. On the other hand, trade between the U.S. and North Korea is up 37% so far this year over last year. So my question is, did President Trump get a specific commitment from President Xi on North Korea?
Well, I think you didn't mean trade between North Korea and the United States. There isn't trade.
If I said that,
no,
between the two.
Yeah. Between China and the United States. Well, you know, as the president said,
trade between North Korea and China is up 37%.
Okay. Yes, it is, and that's why China has the kind of leverage it does have. And that's why the two presidents talked about, could China use that kind of leverage, which they haven't been willing to do in the past, or they've been willing to do a little of it in the past, but were they willing to do a lot more of it? And the Chinese president gave an indication that he would be willing to work with President Trump and with other allies to try to see what could be done. I mean, we all understand that the Korean Peninsula should be denuclearized. We've said it, the Chinese have said it, the Russians, everybody said it. The question is, how do you do it? And the Chinese have always been concerned about instability in the Korean Peninsula. And I think what President Trump was able to convey to the Chinese president is that North Korea is no longer an asset. North Korea is a liability. North Korea is a liability to everybody, and it's a threat not just to the United States, not just to South Korea, not just to Japan, not just to Russia, but it's actually a threat to China as well. And at this point, we have to wait and see. You know, it's like your kids in the back of the car when you're on a long trip saying, when are we going to get there? Well, in this case, I think we should give the Chinese president some opportunities and some time, as well as pursuing the economic and diplomatic pressures that we have and our allies have that we can bring to bear on North Korea.
All right, I've got a limited time. I'm going to remind you of your old job as a Fox News contributor and ask you to give me specific answers here. During the campaign, Mr. Trump talked a lot about getting along or trying to get along with Vladimir Putin and cracking down on China. But this week he seemed to flip 180 degrees on both. Here are a couple of clips.
Right now, we're not getting along with Russia at all. We may be at an all-time low in terms of relationship with Russia. I have really gotten to like and respect, as you know, President Xi. He's a terrific person. Spent a lot of time together in Florida, and he's a very special man.
Again, I need a quick answer. Is that good for the president to shift so dramatically and so quickly on both China and Russia?
Well, first of all, President Trump has now spent a lot of time with President Xi. He's gotten to know him. He's gotten to understand what his priorities are. He shared what our priorities are. He's not yet met with Vladimir Putin. And, you know, the president has said, Secretary Tillerson has said that our relationship with Russia really depends on Russia. We would like to have a good relationship with Russia, but Russia's been doing some things of late, whether it's in Syria, whether it's with American democracy, that we take very seriously. So the ball is in their court. We love a great relationship with them, but it's up to them to take those first steps and to stop taking the steps that could potentially adversely affect us.
This week, the U.S. dropped the largest non-nuclear bomb in our arsenal, the largest it's ever used in combat, on a cave complex in Afghanistan, killing dozens of ISIS fighters. Here was President Trump's explanation.
What I do is I authorize my military. We have the greatest military in the world, and they've done a job as usual. So we have given them total authorization, and that's what they're doing. And frankly, that's why they've been so successful lately.
But KT, while that apparently was a success, there have been some tragic mistakes recently. Just this week, 18 Syrian allies who are rebels who are allies of us were killed in a friendly fire incident by U.S. forces. And the question some people are asking is the White House exercising enough oversight?
Well, first of all, what the president saw, what we all saw when we came into office, was that previous administrations had a lot of decisions that should have been made by the battlefield commanders. They were being made by the West Wing of the White House. And that wasn't the right place. The West Wing of the White House doesn't know what the battlefield is like, what the conditions are like, or the immediacy of the threats that they're facing. So President Trump has taken a number of steps to delegate that authority back where it belongs, back where it was in the Reagan administration, frankly, to the battlefield. And so what you're seeing now is exactly what's happened. Now, sometimes mistakes are being made, and we regret any loss of life, and especially to any of our allies. But on the other hand, it is the battlefield commander's decision to make, and we do not have a president who is going to be sitting there picking out bombing targets. He's left that up to the military, and so far, with a few tragic exceptions, but so far the military has been terrific. I mean, look at the Syria attack on the airport that was used by the Syrians to deliver those chemical weapons. That was done completely successfully, it was done quickly, and it was done with enormous effect, I think.
KT, I want to ask you one last question, and we're less than a minute left, and I want to talk about you. General Michael Flynn brought you in as his #2 national security advisor. Now there's a new head of the NSC, that's General McMaster. He apparently wants his own team. The reports, you know, are that you're out and you're moving to Singapore to be the ambassador there. What's happened, and how do you feel about it?
Well, first of all, President Trump hired me, and he gave me a call on Thanksgiving Day to ask me to be the Deputy National Security Advisor. So I want to set that straight. Now, General Flynn has departed, and General McMaster has arrived. I've helped through that transition, and the President and I have had a number of conversations over the last 2 months, really, about what my role would continue to be and where I could be best used for what his vision is of foreign policy. So I can tell you, we talked about it again last night, and there are changes coming, but I'm not going to tell you what they are. You've gotten enough secrets out of me this day.
All right, but I won't pack my bags to visit you in Singapore quite yet. KT, thank you. Thanks for your time.
Hey, one more thing, Chris.
Yes, ma'am.
One more thing. Happy Easter to you and everybody at Fox News and your entire very large viewing audience.
Well, thank you, and we wish the same to you and to the President's Party. Thank you, especially for your time this holiday weekend, and it's always good to talk with you, KT.
Thanks, Chris.